on that seems to be there to strategically cover her rib cage, to try and draw the eye away from quite how emaciated she is.
Yeah, she hasn't had as many Cuban sandwiches as Dexter.
That's for sure. Cuban. And then we're introduced to La Huerta, and we're basically introduced to her through Deb, who talks about how much she hates her, and Dexter says you can learn something from La Huerta about politics. Deb's trying to get out of vice and into homicide, but it's sort of up to La Huerta, and Dexter tells her to kind of go over her head and go to Captain Matthews because they're friends with Captain Matthews, and their father were friends. And Deb asks Dexter to use his murder scene hunches to come up with ideas to impress and figure out what's going on. And they go out and look at the first ice truck killing, which is this sort of prepared tableau of a person half wrapped in butcher paper, half not, with the limbs kind of taken apart like doll parts.
And it's in a pool.
Yeah, it's at the bottom of a dry pool.
Yeah, which also makes you wonder, why the placement there. I guess it was is the killer trying to send a message, but to who? And the pool is drained. Obviously, the bodies are drained of blood. Is this killer just killing to kill? Or is this killer trying to send a message specifically to a specific community or to the police? It's kind of interesting the way that they place this stuff. I don't know if this was intentional in the writing or not, but there's a lot of little things you can connect that don't necessarily seem like they should make a lot of sense, but then you can think about them and be like, oh, I wonder if that was intentional or not,
It reminds me of Hannibal. It's something that would happen on Hannibal. There'd be a body done up like this, and they'd go into, profiling and tell you, what this means and why this person does these particular kinds of killings and how far along they are and all of that. And Dexter is a show that I really wanted to be kind of like that, even though it preceded Hannibal. But it never quite stays there. It never quite turns into a forensics type of show. Those answers are always just kind of easy and done in the background.
Well, at this point, you don't really know that this killing is anything more than a one and done. Mm-hmm. This was specifically used to introduce us to Deb, La Huerta, Angel, and Masuka. Angel and Masuka are in the pool with the body. And they're so different in that first episode. Mm-hmm. Just so different, from the way they act, the way they talk, to the way they dress.
Yeah.
It's so different later.
Yeah, they just really work to establish the characters in a very basic way. And of course it's the pilot and that's what it's for, but it just seemed like it was just very, very flat introductions of, here's this guy, he cracks jokes. Here's this guy, he's the serious cop. They really blossom into much more interesting characters.
Yeah, I think they were. What I really liked about this pilot, just how much information they put into this first episode. You really get a good feel for a lot of what's going on in this first episode, and the fact that Batista's not developed, or Masuka, the fact that Dokes is wearing a suit in one scene that doesn't kind of make much sense. They don't have the real Miami Metro set yet, so they're in kind of different offices and things like that in this one. It's stuff that you never notice when you're watching the show from the beginning cold, because you don't get used to all that other stuff. You're not used to what Dexter's lab looks like, or what Deb's desk is, or any of that kind of stuff. But the amount of information that they get across, setting up Dexter, setting up the killer that they're going to be trying to figure out throughout the season, the fact that Dexter's Dexter's killing on one hand, but he's also sort of trying to solve this murder a little bit on his own. All of that stuff gets set up in this first episode.
Yeah, it's like this is the inciting incident for the show. It's the fact that there's these murders that are happening, which, like you said, Dale, it's not necessarily a forensic show, but it's like it's so intriguing to this specific character because of what he does. So this is sort of like a really inciting incident for him to get more invested into the things that he does, and then follow along with these other characters that he has to interact with on a daily basis, that he has to be fake with to some degree because of his job.
Yeah, and it's interesting that his first kind of puzzle murder mystery here is a bloodless body, right? Because he's a blood spatter analyst. So there's nothing for him to do here. He's out of his depth, and he's also really impressed.
Jealous. He's almost
by this guy. Yeah, absolutely. So they see the body and all of that. Then Dexter goes to work. He brings in donuts. That's kind of part of his cover, that instead of having conversations with people or trying to have any kind of real relationships at work, he's just the guy that brings donuts every day. Deb shows up and says that she's been put on the case, so she might have a chance of getting into homicide. And then Dexter goes to see Camille, the record supervisor, to get some information out on his next target. And Camille, of course, is played by Margot Martindale, who was not a big name at the time, but now she's... I think there's like less than 3 shows that I'm watching right now that she hasn't been a part of in some way or another. She's just showing up on everything these days.
It's always interesting to see that happen. You see this character or this person and you get used to him. Margot Martindale was just launched to stardom after Justified. And then you go back and you watch something like this and you're like, oh my God, what was she doing in there? How did I not know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's so funny in this one too, is that like they waste her in this show. Her character is she's a fat lady that likes donuts and food. That's it. That's all they give her to work with.
Grabbed a file, I think. She picked up a file.
There you go.
I think she did that.
Let's not take that away from her.
Yeah. So, I think that's all funny. I'm also watching Sneaky Pete right now on Amazon, and she's like the grandmother on that show. So, she is. So... They have a couple of these, what I call Taco Bell Spanish conversations, where it's partially in English, partially in Spanish. There's also a couple of conversations in this episode, like between LaGuerta and Batista, that are completely in Spanish, and because they choose not to subtitle it, it's sort of like... I feel like that's something that they end up dropping fairly quickly as they get into the season, just because they can't do any plot development in there, because a good chunk, I would say the majority of the audience for Dexter is not bilingual.
Yeah, but it should give them a reason to learn to speak Spanish if they want to know what the plot points are. Like, I gotta know what Angel's up to. I gotta start speaking Spanish.
That has to be the dumbest reason to learn to speak Spanish ever.
Or they just don't know what to say and throw in fake words.
Yeah.
Because it's been long enough now that there's a Wikia page for Dexter, and you can go and find all of those conversations translated out. So you can see exactly what all they said.
Fantastic.
Yeah. The one in episode 1 is when they're going into the briefing room. LaGuerta asks Batista how his wife and daughter are doing, and he says fine, and she says take your hat off, and he says excuse me. And that's
that was totally necessary for the development of the pilot episode. Like, sometimes I wonder what the writers are thinking. Like, are they just trying to fill airtime? with some of those moments. You know, it's like
I feel like they really were going for, you know, let's make this authentic Miami, but they were kind of choosing characters that aren't, you know, like especially in this first episode. If you watch this first episode and I asked you who Maria LaGuerta is, you wouldn't be able to tell me, because she's not, you know, these characters aren't quite developed. These side characters aren't quite as developed in here.
Well, I mean, at this point in the first episode, the only interaction with LaGuerta we've had is a cringeworthy wink at the crime scene, which we did not talk about, which we'll have to come back to eventually.
It. Yeah, we'll get into it because it gets
so much to say.
It grows from there, right? So, Dokes shows up for the first time and talks to Dexter. He says, "You give me the fucking creeps," and Dexter makes the point of, you know, why in a police station is Dokes the only one who gets the creeps from me? Like, all of these people should be able to spot that there's something wrong. It isn't as noticeable in this first episode, but it is something that will recur in season 1. If you watch Dexter when he's at a crime scene, he's grinning ear to ear when he's doing like blood spatter analysis or any of that kind of stuff. And it is just like he can't help himself. He steps through Dokes' case and does a blood spatter analysis in this stark white crime scene. Now, this was something that I was hopeful would be an ongoing thing on the show, kind of like the way, like, especially early episodes of House, they would talk about something medical and like the camera would shoot inside the body and show you this representation of a disease going on. Dexter walking through a blood spatter and showing how that informs what the weapon was, what the positions of the bodies were, all of that sort of thing. It's great in this episode, and then they just kind of stop doing it. Everything turns into, you know, DNA sequences. Like, everything after this, to me, seems like they just do a Google search, or the equivalent of doing a Google search, and they solve whatever crime is necessary to solve.
It's like they didn't want to invest in research and having to do the act. Thought it was. They're just like, let's just.
Well, CSI already existed, so they were probably trying to set themselves apart.
I can see that.
That is true.
I still kind of wanted a little bit more science in it, but that was an expectation I had the first time that I watched it, was that it was going to be a little bit more, or kind of like Psych. You know, I don't know if you watched that show, but he's just really perceptive, and he picks up on all these extra things that people don't see, and that kind of stuff's always cool. It always makes you feel smart to watch that kind of stuff as an audience. So then Dexter starts stalking the valet, who he breaks into his house, has some trouble with his dog, and then he finds some ads that the guy's running for a website that he started called Scream Bitch Scream.
Classy.
Yeah. And then we have a flashback where Harry and Dexter are talking about whether Dexter wants to kill people. And as a young child, it says he does want to kill people.
Do you think that the flashbacks really do service the story? I mean, is it necessary? Like, would it be something where he could just monologue about it, and we would, or do you need to see him as a child with those interactions with?
But I feel they're necessary, and maybe this has to be a better way to execute that. Flashbacks just, and he's got his little mug of milk sitting on the boat, like, you know, it's just.
So my thought behind those, and why I think those are important, is that we, and I think something that they were very conscious of when they were writing the early episodes of the season, we don't know if we can trust Dexter yet, right? So things that Dexter tells us, he's a serial killer. Why should we trust him? The flashback serves as either this really happened and we can trust it, or Dexter believes this happened so strongly that it's what he's operating against. It's how he sees the world. The whole setup of Harry's code, which is done mostly in flashback in this season, because he's not doing the conscious thing yet. I think that's what that serves, those flashbacks. Yeah, they could be done better, I think. But I think that's kind of the thing, is that whether or not we have a trust, it's telling us that we can trust Dexter because he is telling us the truth, and these flashbacks are backing up why he acts the way he acts and how deep-seated and long this has been a part of his life.
It's also a nod to the book without using the Dark Passenger, because in the book, a lot of these nods to Harry are conversations between Dexter and his Dark Passenger. They cut that completely out of the show and replace it with James Remar, which is fine. If you have James Remar, use James Remar. I thought the flashbacks were fine. They were harmless, and they set up the idea behind the show, like who Dexter is and how he became. How did he develop?
Yeah, it's his history.
Yeah, I get that for sure. I just the thing that kind of throws me off the most is seeing the evolution of who they cast as the kid to play the younger Dexters, and then just being like the placement of the moles on his faces. And
maybe that's why it bothers me.
Yeah, like I'm almost too distracted by the visualization of it to really let the information sink in. Like, I still get it, and I'm glad that the information is there to help me with the character development. But at the same time, there's something about the visualization of it where I'm just like, I don't know, that kid doesn't look like Dexter, which is a stupid reason not to like it, but yeah.
I agree that it's got to be in there. I'm with you, Zach. Something about it just did. The exposition was so. Yeah, there had to be a better way.
Yeah, and it might just come down to, getting the most out of 44 minutes. There might not have been a shorter way to come up with that or to show that information. So now we get to Rita. And first we get Dexter's insight into sex, which he refers to as undignified. But he thinks he's found the perfect girlfriend because she's, in a way, as damaged as he is. We meet Rita, Aster, and Cody, and Rita is shell-shocked from the abuse. She's not interested in sex, really, and that's perfect for Dexter. He's actually concerned that whenever things start to get more physical between him and women, that they can see through the fact that he's not a normal guy, and so he's still trying to keep that relationship going with Rita.
I do want to point something out about this scene. When they introduce Rita, it has Dexter's voiceover giving you a rundown of just how horrific the abuse at the hands of her ex-husband was. And while they do this, it zooms in on her door and it opens up, and it's like something out of Little House on the Prairie. There she is, her hair's blowing in the wind, there's like a white light on her. It's an awesome scene.
Yeah, she doesn't appear to be damaged. She doesn't appear to have suffered much trauma based upon the first visualization we have of her. So, but I also feel like that's what's so great about her performance is that she does sell it when she needs to sell it. I mean, not sell it, but like the actress sells it when she needs to sell it. But like that's an interesting choice. That's a directorial choice. I feel like, to have that voiceover done while opening the door and being given like a ray of sunshine, and then really though it's this dark, disgusting, awful things that have happened to her that really influences the way that she acts.
Yeah, I mean, she's really sweet and but also a bit skittish and mousy. And they're explaining that Dexter's explanation helps you understand that, it's not that she's a naive, Pollyanna or something like that. It's more that she can only put herself out there so much right now.
Yeah.
He takes her on a date and they go to some sort of rave/crab bashing party. I don't know. I guess that's a thing in Miami.
I know that was a thing.
So they're smashing the crabs and dancing the raves.
In like the most impressive way ever. Like they push their way through the crowd, and she gets to this bar and just starts whacking something with a hammer, and you have no idea what she's doing. It just looks like, oh god. And,
I really have no idea what she's doing.
And then it's revealed that she's beating up a crab, and you're just like, ah.
Yeah, you got to break in there.
I've been to a lot of crab places, and there's no dance party music like that at most of the crab places that I go to. I mean, the Crab Shack in Maryland it's just a crab shack,
Do they have hammers?
They do have the hammers. The mallets actually is a part of it. That's a thing, and that's a very much like a east. But I guess it's an East Coast thing to some degree. But like to do it in that sort of communal way, I don't know. That's just a lot of wasted crab. Like you're just smashing. Somebody
had a brilliant idea that, we've got these crabs and that's great. And we got these people that come in and hit them with hammers and that's even better. But the problem is that once all these people are here hitting crabs with hammers, it's so loud. If only we had something to drown out how loud those hammers were. I know. Let's throw a rave on top of it.
This is how dubstep came to be.
Nothing makes you want to dance like smashing crab.
Crab meat.
Also, the club is the club from Night at the Roxbury. The inside of the club looks like outside, and the outside of the club looks like the inside.
I'm just going to say, based on what everyone's hands are going to be like after smashing all that crab up, that this place should be called the Wet Nap.
Nice.
Yeah, a murder or body being found outside of this isn't even a thing about.
No.
Not even close.
Didn't even slow it down either. I think the police lights just enhance the party.
Yeah. And Dexter just kind of casually walks away from Rita, and he's like, hang on a sec, I'm going to see if they need me. And it's another bloodless ice truck body that he walks into.
Yeah, I love that he's like, they might need me, like, they're like, he just happens to be at the right place at the right time, all the time. They might need me, blood stuff. Like, yeah, he's real important in the Miami Metro PD.
There are often very bloody incidents that happen at the crab rave. The Wet Nap is a pretty dangerous place. Exactly.
When the beat drops and you're rolling and you got a hammer, you don't know what's up.
As long as you don't reference the bloody crab in any way, I think it's like that you give yourself some way to walk away from the bloody crab.
So he goes and looks at it for a second. He's like, "Hey, look, it's another body." And then he takes her home, and they're sitting in the car, and he's trying to describe like what the cuts are like, and he kind of runs his hand over her inner thigh. She freaks out, runs away from the car and all that kind of thing. And it takes him a second, and he's like, why is she running away? And then he says, wait a minute, why did I touch her like that?
I'd run away too.
So, she just says she doesn't want to, and he doesn't get the hint until after she's left the car that she's seeing that as a advance, and that's not really what he was up to. He's not trying to initiate at all because that's not what he wants.
See, I thought that scene could actually have been interpreted as either, because of how his mannerisms were. Like, he was clearly, like, into this as he's explaining it, and he just reaches down and goes for it.
But he's all about the dead body. It's not a sexual
into
thing.
it because of the body.
Yeah. That's what he's excited about. He's not excited about her.
Oh.
Well, it's almost interesting, too, because not that this was an intention at all, but what if potentially that could be a turning point for him where he stops living by Harry's code and turns into like a legit serial killer, based upon his study of other serial killers, like we're trusting that he is a good serial killer to some degree because of what he's doing. But at the same time, like, what keeps that in check? Harry's code? Well, what happens if Harry's code goes out the window and then he's got Rita? I mean, there's like I'm not sure. I'm sure they never intended to go that direction, but like, there's always what ifs, for motives for these characters like this with these psychological things.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, he's looking at his new target again. He goes to the guy's website and finds a tattoo that matches the guy, so he knows that the guy made this snuff film, and he's still vetting him, but he's pretty sure that he's got a guy that needs to go, that deserves to be killed. Harry talks about how before they took Dexter in, something happened to him that gives him the urge to kill, but they don't say what it is at this point. And then Harry says, we can't stop this, but we can channel it into something good. And he talks about people that get away at trial and people who deserve to die according to his morality, even if the justice system fails them. And then we see Dexter setting up the kill room for the guy.
Yeah, you got to cover up those tattoos if you're going to make videos of you killing people. Like, that's like number one rule. Yeah. Jeez.
The kill room's a little different than the other ones in the series. He uses hefty bags on the walls. There's a rubber sheet on the bed, and he uses saran wrap on his face for some reason. So there's that. And then we go to Dexter and Deb having lunch. They are having this kind of funny back and forth. Dexter's kind of ribbing her about not having a boyfriend. She says, "You sound like Mom," which I think is kind of a mistake in a way in the show. That I feel like the writers hadn't decided at this point if their mother was still alive or not. But in the canon of the show, their mother dies of cancer before their father dies, and so she's long gone and wouldn't have ever really been old enough to tell Deb, like, go have babies.
Yeah, one of the first flashbacks, he talks about Dexter killing a dog, and Dexter mentions that the dog kept barking and Mom had been sick.
Yeah.
So way back when, like,
but that was like the youngest
kids,
that was like the youngest Dexter that we see in the flashbacks.
That she's bedridden at this point.
Yeah.
And so
Such a big myth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't know if it was just like, you sound like a mother, like if it was just a misinterpreted line, or if it was that they really didn't realize that, it wouldn't make sense for Deb to have gotten grandchildren guilt from her mom, being that she died when Deb was a teenager.
Grandchildren talk at a young age. We get a whole different set of issues.
Yeah. That's bigger than a wet nap problem. So Deb starts talking about cell crystallization, and they start coming up with this theory for the refrigerated truck, there's a brief scene where the guy he kills in the opening, his wife is at the police station crying, and Dexter's kind of watching through the window, and Doak sneaks up behind Dexter and is like, "Is that your thing, psycho? You like it when they cry?"
Doak's so over the top, but he's such a great character.
Cartoonish in the pilot with that.
Yeah, he's Samuel L. Jackson in the pilot. Like
Samuel L. Jackson light, yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting though. Like, yes, I do agree that he is over the top and has those moments, but he's the only guy that really calls things out. Like, you know, I mean, it's one of those moments where like Dexter feels almost, I don't want to say invincible, but to a degree, Dexter's a really smart guy as a character. And, you know, and he feels that sense of invincibility. He's been killing for a while. He clearly has a stack of blood plates that we know he's done a lot of kills. And yet there's this one guy that continuously calls out his behavior. Because it is weird that he smiles when he walks through a crime scene. It is weird that he gets turned on by blood. It is weird that he's standing there staring at a crying woman and just like, it's not his place. So I kind of applaud Dokes for doing that, for being like the straight man, let's say, and calling out Dexter's odd behavior.
Deb tries to talk about the refrigerated truck theory to LaGuerta at the briefing. LaGuerta belittles her a little bit and says, "I didn't recognize you with your clothes on." And then Deb's delivery of the theory is an absolute train wreck, and she doesn't get permission to look into ice truck thefts.
Tells her to keep talking to her hookers.
Yes.
Like, not just hookers, her hookers.
Right.
Well, she does, but she does say her girls, though. Like, there's a number of times that she says my girls and this thing and that thing. And again, that's going back to Deb, you know, putting up that wall, but, you know, she's hiding that sensitivity, that compassion, that heart inside of her. And so, like, I mean, for LaGuardia to say that, yeah, that's not something a higher ranking person should say to a low ranking person in a way. But like Deb does refer to them as her girls, so she's got a soft spot for those hookers.
And she's trying to keep them alive too, because it's that community that's being murdered by the ice truck killer. So
yeah, hookers are always the number one target for serial killers. I don't know, like, it's weird.
They're expendable. That's why. No, I mean that's the reasoning behind it, is that people don't miss them when they're gone. So
red shirts.
Yeah.
So this scene right after LaGuerta tears Deb down, it's a pretty good scene between a brother and a sister. I guess the best we're gonna get between Dexter and anybody else.